Thank you very much for this invitation. I came from Rome for Rav Elia Ben-Amozeg, so I'm very happy to be here. And I will speak on the subject is Rav Elia Ben-Amozeg and Shaul Paul of Tarsus. Rav Elia Ben-Amozeg, in the introduction to his cousin Avram Koryat's Berit Avot, Livorno, 1862, strongly emphasizes his connection to the Moroccan tradition. This is therefore the tradition to which I have the honor of reconnecting. This tradition develops its roots in the Maghreb and has never known interruption. The fathers have acquired merits for their sons, and the study has never died out in their mouth. Together with his uncle Yehuda, he had read the Zohar twice, a book that was of great importance in his education. It should be noted that there is a special relationship between the Zohar and the city of Livorno, since 5 editions of the work were made in that city between the 18th and the 19th centuries. Elia himself, together with Leoni and Milul, had published an edition of the Zohar in 1851. Now, it is precisely the Zohar that attributes extraordinary significance to those years. I quote, "In the 600th year of the 6th millennium," the year 5600 corresponds to the year 1840, "the gates of Torah knowledge will open from above, simultaneously with the gates of knowledge from below." End of the quote. This gives us an insight into the horizons in which Ben-Amozeg placed his activity in those years. It should also not be forgotten that he participated in the events of the Risorgimento and enthusiastically welcomed the birth of the Kingdom of Italy, 1861, and the new possibilities it opened up for Italian Jews with the extension of the Statuto Albertino, the Constitution, and the spread of emancipation. This is the background that must be kept in mind in order to understand the spirit with which Ben-Amozeg took the courageous decision to participate in the competition announced in 1860 by the Alliance Israélite Universelle, in which he was asked to examine from the points of view of dogmatics and morality the elements that Judaism had transmitted to the religions that followed it. The work he intended to write was to comprise 4 parts. The first on dogma, in which he would deal with the Trinity, the Incarnation, and the abolition of Torah. The second on worship, in which he would deal with everything that, having an evangelical origin, could be traced back to Jewish roots. The third on history, in which a life of Jesus would find a place, and the fourth on morality. However, the entire plan of the work could not be realized by the date set by the Alliance, and Ben-Amozeg decided to send only the parts that were ready on the origin of Christianity, the Trinity, and morality. He therefore sent a manuscript entitled Essai sur l'origine des dogmes et de la morale du christianisme to Paris in 1863. The jury decided to award the part 3, which was published under the title Morale juive et morale chrétienne. The first 2 parts remained unpublished for 140 years. The Italian translation was published in 2002, and the French translation 10 years after in Paris. So it's important to observe that there is not only morale juive and morale chrétien that is important for the study of what Ben-Amozeg thought about Christianity, but also this other book, L'origine des dogmes chrétiens, and also La storia degli esseni, which is published in Italian. So one of the difficulties of Ben-Amozeg that he wrote in 3 languages: Hebrew, Italian, and French. And it's difficult to find scholars who can dominate these 3 languages. We have, of course, Alessandro Guetta, Clémence Boulouk, and others, but this is a difficulty. And also for the edition of the works by Ben-Amozeg. There are still unpublished works in the archives of the community, the Jewish community of Leghorn. And there is not such a publication of Opera Omnia. Just to mention one difficulty for the study of this very important author. In writing those pages, Morale juive, morale chrétien, he was filled with the conviction that he was about to grasp the thread that unites Christianity to Judaism. And that this thread would perhaps one day make it possible to prepare a revision of Christianity, not on the basis of external criteria, but on the basis of a tradition of which Christianity itself constitutes an emanation. I quote, "I saw ever-widening horizons opening up before my eyes," writes Ben-Amozeg in his preface to Morale juive et morale chrétienne, recalling the days and nights of tireless work. It's important also because Aimé Pallière didn't cooperate for the publication of these 2 books, and also not of publication of Storia degli Esseni, and not of the publication of l'introduction à Israël et l'humanité. As we heard, the rabbi from Livorno believed that the oral Torah was as old as the written Torah, and found, this is very interesting, he found in the New Testament confirmation of this thesis. He found in the New Testament the confirmation of the thesis of the antiquity of Chokhmah, that science that can take the names of achromatism, esotericism, mysticism, or Kabbalah, depending on the preferences and the idiosyncrasies of the times. The Gospels speak of the mysteries hidden in the parables and accessible only to the disciples, and announce that the secrets will be revealed. I don't say now the quotations, but I have here, I can say it if you want. The one who above all took on the task of revealing them was Shaul, Paul of Tarsus, who in the 2nd letter of Corinthians describes his ascension into the 3rd heaven, the similarities of which Ben-Amozeg shows with the entry into Pardes. However, in his work of popularization, the Apostle of the Gentiles made a reduction and simplification, and these reductions and simplification are the speculative equivalent of that abolition of the law of which we shall speak now. Ben-Amozeg thought that the real problem between Jews and Christians was the abolition of the law, the abolition of the Torah. the first letter to Timotheus, Paul addresses his disciple, exhorting him not to devote himself to, I quote, fables and endless generations, which according to Ben-Amozeg corresponds exactly to the innumerable, I quote, emanations of the Sephirot and the Aeons, their divisions into families, parents, children, brothers, sisters, spouses. Paul prefers to focus on those Sephirot that will give rise to the Christian Trinity, Chokhmah, Tiferet, and Malchut, or Chokhmah, Binah, Tiferet. He says there is a confusion in Christianity between these two kinds of triad. He focused especially on Tiferet, the central Sephirah, in which all the 6 lower Sephirot are enclosed, with the exception of Malchut. The Trinity and the Incarnation, it means the Tiferet's eternal incarnation in Malchut. That means that there is an origin, a Jewish origin of the idea of Trinity, but at the same time, the development of this idea was outside Judaism. He says this kind of theories came out from Judaism, and it has 2 meanings. They have their origin in Judaism, and they also became independent from Judaism. So the Trinity and the Incarnation are originally Jewish concepts, Jewish idea, that later underwent development and alterations in non-Jewish circles. I quote, "Since we consider the dogma of the triplicity of persons to be one of the greatest and most baleful departures from Kabbalistic orthodoxy, let us see if once he has been denied, Christianity will change its appearance entirely, strip itself of what is contrary to Judaism, it will lay aside those borrowed garments, those shreds of paganism, which made it inrecognizable to its parents, which caused it to be expelled from the paternal home, which produced and perpetuated the divorce, the enmity, the fratricidal struggle between Judaism and Christianity, of which the world still mars today." But the biggest problem in the relationship between Christianity and Judaism, as I said, is the alleged abolition of the law, for which Ben-Amozeg held Shaul, Paul, himself to be most responsible. What was the line the early Christians should have taken? Between the 2 extreme solutions of Yaakov, James, who wanted to make the Torah obligatory also for the Gentiles, and Shaul, Paul, who wanted to abolish it for all, there is a third way, Mosaicism for Israel and Noahism for the Gentiles. In holding Shaul, Paul responsible for the abolition of the law within Christendom, Ben-Amozeg was influenced by a long exegetical and theological tradition, which continues to exert its influence to this day. In recent years, however, this tradition has begun to be challenged. The letters of Shaul Paul are of extraordinary linguistic and conceptual complexity, and this has allowed for a number of misunderstandings. Examples could be many, but we will limit ourselves to 2 passages. Let us begin with Romans 8:2, where the apostle states, quote, "For the Torah of the Spirit of life in the Messiah has delivered you from the law of sin and death. Here Shud is not contrasting the new spiritual law with the Torah. The misunderstanding arises from the fact that he used the term nomos, the Greek word nomos, both to refer to the Torah and to refer to the law of sin. The law of sin is sin himself. Itself, the structure of sin, from which those who are the Messiah, according to Shaul, have been delivered. In Romans 10:4, we find this sentence, telos gar nomu Christos, which does not mean that the Christ is the Greek word for Messiah, which does not mean that Christ is the end of the law, as it has been interpreted as still. There are many Christian scholars who think that that is the meaning of this sentence, but that the Messiah is the goal of the Torah. There is a big difference. After all, a disciple is no more than his master. And how could Shaul have proclaimed the abolition of the Torah when his master had explicitly stated, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the Torah and the Nevi'im. I have not come to abolish them, but to spread them in their fullness," the contrary of abolition. "For I say to you that until the heavens and the earth pass away, not even a yod or a tag will be erased from the Torah until all things are fulfilled. Therefore, he who shall undo the smallest of mitzvot and to teach men shall be the smallest in the Malchut HaShamayim, and he who shall do and teach them shall be called great in the Malchut HaShamayim." This is Matthew 5:17-19. After the new perspective on Paul, a new stream of studies has emerged in recent years, which is called Paul within Judaism. Here is what Nanos, one of its exponents, writes. "My publications to date have focused on the reinterpretation of Paul's letters. The working hypothesis I'm testing involves reading Paul's letters as if written by a Jew who remained Torah observant after he became convinced that Jesus was the Christ, and of a calling to take that message to the nations. So far, this proposition has been confirmed by my research on these letters. The mystical experience on the road to Damascus was never described by Shaul as a conversion. He was never converted. He didn't change religion. But it was called, following the example of the prophet Yirmiyahu, to be Navi Lagoim, a prophet to the nations. There is no devaluation of Torah and mitzvot in favor of faith in these letters. But in the short time that remained in his view, and it was a mistake, in the short time that he thought that remained, he believed that the peoples were not bound to observe the Moshe covenant, and found in Avram the father of the circumcised and uncircumcised. In his letters, Shaul always distinguishes between Theos, Elohim, and curious, Hashem, on the one hand, and Christos on the other. It is not to him that the deification of the Messiah goes back. The problem lies in the word curious, that in the translations in Greek is used for both, for the Messiah instead of Adon, and for the Tetragrammaton. It must also be borne in mind that if the Apostle of Gentiles had a preponderant place in the formation of the Church of the Gentiles, Ecclesia ex Genticus, in the first century there were other figures, even more authoritative than him, such as Yaakov, James, who emphasized the indissoluble link between faith and works. This first movement, Messianic movement, inside Judaism was destroyed during the two Roman wars. The Romans were not against the religion, they were against Yehudim, against the Judeans. But these catastrophic events from 66 to 135 had consequences in the Messianic movement. The Emperor Adriano prohibited the entrance to Yehudim in Jerusalem. And then until that moment, all the bishops or the chiefs of the community were Yehudim, Shomer Mitzvot, and after 135, only Ecclesia ex Genticus took the power. And then the center of this movement became Rome, of course, and not the destroyed town of Jerusalem. 2 minutes. I thought. So I have to summarize. It's 40 years that I work in Christian-Jewish dialogue. Christian-Jewish dialogue is for me very important because I discovered that I'm a Jew through Christian-Jewish dialogue. I have a son of the Shoah, so my mother had to escape from all Europe, from the Ottoman Empire, Germany, France, Italy, Rome during the occupation, the Nazi occupation. She survived, I don't know how. For her, it was impossible to speak about these things. Judaism was death, and hiding Judaism was surviving. So it took me a lot of time and energy to discover this whole story. I received a Catholic education, then I became an atheist at 16, after 68, and so on. Then when I had a general crisis, I became again religious, and the religion that I knew, but it was only through Christian-Jewish dialogue that I discovered that I could not to be a Jew. And so at the age of 39 years, I had my Brit Milah here in Jerusalem. And this is very shortly the reason why for me it's so important is the Christian-Jewish dialogue. And I think that what is happening in Christian-Jewish relations, it's very, very important, but not very much known. For example, in 1980, John Paul II said that the first alliance, the alliance with Israel, was never revoked. We had centuries of theology, of supersessionism. Once Israel was elected, but then after the deicide, the election became a malediction, and the new Israel, the church, took the place of this. A Pope, 1980, the first alliance was never revoked. The same Pope entered in 1986 in the synagogue of Rome, in the great synagogue of Rome, welcomed by Chief Rabbi Elihu, who is the pupil of Ben-Amozeg. The father of Rav Toaf was Rav Alfredo Sabato Toaf, and Alfredo Sabato Toaf was the father and also the teacher of Elihu Toaf. So there is a very linear link between the three. And in 1993, for the first time, the State of Israel was recognized by the Holy Church. Centuries of theology, the expulsion, the galut, is the demonstration of the truth of Christianity. It took from 1948 to 1903 that the diplomatic relations were established. And in 2000, John Paul II came for the first time in the State of Israel, because Paul VI came here, but he didn't recognize the State of Israel, so he arrived to the Cenacolo through the no man's land. He could not enter in the State of Israel. John Paul II entered in the State of Israel, arrived at the Kotel, and then he gave a prayer, very beautiful. I don't know if I have here, but you can find it, asking forgiveness for what the Christians have done during 19th century of anti-Judaism. I'm finished. I think only that these are signs of a teshuvah that is in our days going on. And I think that Ben-Amozeg has a lot of things to say in the Christian-Jewish dialogue. It was, of course, a forerunner of Christian-Jewish dialogue, but one of the most important. Thank you very much.